as I said, let's pretend we're professionals. And welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Actually, let's not pretend we're professionals because I don't think that's not what people like about the show.
We're never going to maintain it anyway.
Yeah, I'd maintain it for like 45 seconds. And then
Actually,
I'd be like,
so last week when I was at the film festival, somebody
that's Pete Rollick talking. We haven't done introductions yet.
So somebody came up to me and said that Joe used to be their favorite character, but now I am.
Yes, we are all fictional characters. Mm-hmm.
Thank God. I'd hate to think about all of us running around in the real world.
Yeah, there's a rule I go by. If you never have to go to the bathroom, you're in a virtual reality of some sort or a simulated reality, or in a book.
Well, didn't the first set of plans for
the movie
that came out lack bathrooms?
Really?
Yeah, I think when they did the first fan versions or official fan versions of the Enterprise, there were no bathrooms.
Yeah.
Wasn't that originally the Brady Bunch? They never had a bathroom or a toilet even in the house. You saw the entire house and there was never a bathroom. That was the Brady Bunch syndrome. That's where it first cropped up.
Same thing with the and this is important, I know. The same thing with the Flash and his little prison underneath Star Labs. None of them had bathrooms till they realized they didn't have bathrooms, and they retroactively hid them in the walls. So, when they take metahuman prisoners, evil metahuman prisoners, hopefully. So anyway, Lovecraft eZine podcast. Our guests today are Alan Baxter and Clay McLeod Chapman. Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Hello. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. Special guest star today, Sean Hamill. Hey, Sean.
Hi, I did it again. Thank you for having me.
That's strike two right there. I'm sorry.
I deserve that.
Okay, so for those who are listening like later in their car on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, if you do want to see our faces, which I'm not sure why that would be. Well, actually, I'll just speak for myself. The rest of you guys look fine. We're on every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. So just go to YouTube, type in Lovecraft eZine podcast. Or vice versa. If you're watching on YouTube live and or watching later, and you want to listen on the go, we're on Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, all kinds of places like that. So, I'm a little behind because it's been hectic lately in my life, but the idea is less than a week later to get the audio from the video podcast onto, iTunes and so forth. So I'm a couple behind. Please bear with me, but I will get there within the next week. So I do have a Patreon. Okay, so I don't think Pete, have I ever mentioned this Patreon? I don't think so. Yeah, you're muted too. People like you get some really cool stuff. It's only $5 a month to start. So people like Victor Lavelle, Christopher Buhlman, the guy who wrote Those Across the River, Emma Gibbon, Gemma Files, Jeffrey Ford. Actually, Jeff said on Facebook earlier today, or might have been yesterday, that my recent interview with John Langan, actually ours, because Laird was there, and I think you were there, Matt.
Yes.
Was worth the price of admission alone. So you get all that at the starting at $5 a month, and then if you look at the Patreon, when you go up, there's more benefits, and I've got a link in the show notes, but you can just Google Lovecraft eZine Patreon if you want, and that'll work. And last but not least, I would, before we do introductions, I'd really appreciate if you like the show, and presumably you do if you've been watching it. If you drop a rating on iTunes, that seems to be this will probably change, just like everything changes on the internet sooner or later. But if you have lots of reviews or high ratings on iTunes, it really affects your show, the visibility, and we're still building our audience, hopefully. So if you could do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's do introductions. Sean Hamill is muted again, and Sean wrote a book called A Cosmology of Monsters. It's been out for what, a year and a half, something like that?
2 years and 1 month as of today.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
Stephen King loved it. Did you get my email about that?
I did. I haven't had a chance to follow the link, but I did see it come through.
Yeah, there's this really bad movie called oh man, what's it called?
Wasn't it Stuck in Love?
Stuck in Love, yeah.
It's called Lake Mungo.
Matt, I do have the ability to eject you. Yeah, it's called Stuck in Love. Do not watch it. It's basically a Lifetime movie, unless you're into Lifetime movies. But there's this one section where this kid, he writes a short story. His sister, unbeknownst to him, sends the short story to Stephen King, which I don't know how you do that, but if anybody knows, let me know. No, I got friends of Stephen King, but I'm not going to intrude on that. And Stephen King, in the movie actually calls him, it's the real Stephen King, and tells him that he loves his story and everything. And I'm thinking, that is the ultimate. That's really cool. And it is. I'm not being facetious. And I said to Sean, that's basically a version of what Stephen King did to him. He loved your book.
Yeah. It was really nice benediction to go out into the world with, and a nice hook to hang my hat on. Pretty much for the rest of my life, I've got that. If nothing else goes right ever, I've still got the blurb from Stephen King.
I was gonna say do keep writing, but if you die tomorrow, you did well.
Oh, thank you.
And plus, you appeared on the Lovecraft eZine podcast.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
There's always that.
There's nowhere to go but down at this point.
Just let me know which is more important, the Stephen King thing or the Lovecraft eZine podcast thing.
Yeah, I'll ponder.
Put some thought into it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Rich Bunting, would you like to introduce yourself? One of my panelists.
Sure. Hi, my name's Rich. I'm just a Lovecraft eZine fanboy. Mike Davis fanboy. I'm jealous because he's got all that silvery hair and I've got none. That's the only reason I'm on this podcast, is to look at the hair.
If I had a nickel for every time I heard that.
You'd have a nickel.
Right. Exactly. Pete Rollick. Writer Pete Rollick. Introduce yourself.
Oh.
So when people hear your voice later, when they're listening to the audio version, they know who's talking. And they know who's dissing my movie, The 13th Warrior.
There's nothing wrong with the 13th.
The 13th Warrior is a good movie. You don't like it,
movie.
Pete? Jeez.
No, I just no.
Why do you hate America, Pete?
No, it's why does America hate me?
That should be bloody obvious. Good golly.
No, actually, there's nothing wrong with the 13th Warrior. It's secretly a Lovecraft film. It is. You have to read the book to figure this out.
Yeah, so is the Terminator.
The book has it in afterward.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Would you like to talk about a couple of books you've written, and then we can go on to the...
Oh yeah, I've written some stuff like.
Oh, wait a minute. You just wrote a book, and I've got the link again in the show notes. The Miskatonic
University Spiritualism Club.
Yeah, that is a beautiful looking book.
It is, and Sean Hamill blurbed it for me.
Okay, never mind.
And Bridget has a copy. And,
nice, Bridget. When do I get my signed copy? I just want to know.
I don't look. We sold out of an entire case at the film festival.
You
I
mean
did not-
aside from the one you set aside for me?
No. We
I-
sold.
Moving on.
No, listen. We sold all every copy we brought, but didn't have accounted for. Like there was like Bridget's copy, people who pre-ordered, we had to set those aside. But everything else, we sold out completely. The copy I read from, I had to give to someone. We sold everything at the show.
You know, I've got a free copy of Whisper Down the Lane, just so you know.
I'm gonna get you a copy.
It's not autographed, but I do have a free copy of Whisper Down the Lane.
I don't even know why I try anymore.
Pete,
I'm
the book
kidding,
is really
Pete.
good.
I'm kidding, Pete, but people are posting pictures of this book online when they receive it. It's a beautiful looking book, and they're obviously loving it. So I just wanted to embarrass
Watch my
Pete with
chops.
that.
You're gonna make me cry.
Okay, all right.
Mute, mute, please. Mute. Just mute, Pete. You'll collect yourself and then just stay muted.
Victor says one of the things he loves about this show is the camaraderie and the back and forth. So we're proving that today before we even interview the guests.
Yeah, camaraderie. Luckily, we were not all in the same room with knives. God.
Well, Alan Baxter is here. We're very lucky.
Segue.
Bridget, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Bridget, token scream queen. I do some music and draw things sometimes too.
You're
Oh,
the screen queen for this show?
You are not our
No,
screen
come
queen.
on. Your book just came out with your illustrations. So why don't you
That's
tell us
true.
about that?
All right.
Yeah.
Yes. So I had the
You're
lovely.
not just a final girl. You do more.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have to survive though. So being a final girl ain't all bad. But I did. Yes, I had the honor of illustrating Jude Madalich Hall's book, The Eversteam Chronicles, which is a dark fantasy, sort of sarcastic satire, fabulous book. That was a lot of fun to draw. If you like Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman and that kind of satire kind of humor and also enjoy reading things about heaven and hell, you'll love this book.
What's the title again?
The Eversteam Chronicles.
Okay. And you and who's the author? You're the illustrator.
Jude, it's by Jude Madalich Hall. Yeah.
Okay. And you've got a book, you kickstarted it. I pledged to the Kickstarter, right? Many did. It was successful. And
Yes.
but you're gonna, if you didn't get on Kickstarter, you'll be selling them too. Just real briefly, tell us about that.
Oh, sure. Thanks. That's my Haunting Melody workbook
Because it's a really cool idea.
that for people that want to learn about horror music and writing horror music, it's kind of an interactive illustrated music workbook. If you know stuff about music, then it'll have little exercises for you to do. If you don't, then hopefully you'll just enjoy the story and the art and get some inspiration.
It's kind of like Rick buying the Cthulhu Wars for the big figures. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. How many of us
Except-
actually get to play a game, but we love looking at the books, don't we?
I gotta say, the third wave of Cthulhu Wars still has not arrived. It finished in 2019, so we may be showing you figurines later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think how I'm going to have to explain that to Isabel.
I'm going to change really. I'm going to change your name in the square here to Old Man Shakes Fists at Clouds, or
all of us who collect, who contribute to these Kickstarters have promised our wives that we'll never do it again. And now
I know, and then
everything is going to come very late, and they're going to think you broke your word.
Yeah, you guys are absolutely right.
It may be true that I broke my word, but not about that. Jeez.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, don't jinx me, Rick.
Wait. I guarantee you that there will be Kickstarter stuff arriving at my house long after I'm dead.
It's
Emma,
a
You got
legacy.
everybody got Autumn Cthulhu one time. That's all I got to say.
I'm still
Boom.
waiting. What's the late one that's the Lovecraft Country? Is that the one that's been taken forever?
Pirates of the Old World still
Well,
isn't out.
The book that has I can't remember his name now. He did a study of Innsmouth and Arkham and Dunwich.
Was that Donovan Laux?
No, it's guy who did the annotated King and Yell.
That's
Oh,
Rick.
yeah. Hi, yeah, that was Heights, right?
Yeah,
Kevin Hite.
Kevin
Kevin
Hite.
Hite. Yeah. He has not yet released that either, and that was finished 2-3 years ago.
You know, you're right, but are you done complaining? Because I'd like for you to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Matt. I run the eZine movie night. We are currently going to be watching episodes 3 and 4 of Chapel 8 next Saturday. Anyway, our prize today is a nice, good, long urban fantasy read. It is not horror. I liked it, but I just don't have room on the shelf to keep it. It is a hardcover.
That's what your wife said, yeah.
Yeah, basically. So if you want to win this book, just send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put guild in the subject heading. We usually draw the winner 6 weeks later, so it could be you.
Rick Lay.
Rick Lay, writer whose computer went committed Harry Carey on him this week, and I just fixed my email a half hour ago.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you're here. It's good to see you. By the way, if you're watching the show live, I'll be brief with this because that's the smallest amount of the audience, but a very loyal part of the audience that I really appreciate, watching live. You can tip me if you want. Just look at the $sign in the comments there to keep the show going. Or you can be a patron or both or whatever. Or if you do none of those things, I will still keep doing this as long as I'm able to pay the bills. So Clay and Alan, would you guys please introduce yourself? Clay, you want to start?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I did cut my hair for this.
Yeah.
So I figured that would be for the Patreons out there.
It's
they
beautiful.
Would get to
I thought
see
you
the
were Jean-Luc
actual...
Picard with a beard for a second there.
So I look a little shinier today. But hi, my name is Clay McLeod Chapman. Most recently, I wrote a novel called Whisper Down the Lane, which came out on Quirk Books back in April. And before that, I wrote another novel called The Remaking. But yeah, that's me.
Kelly Young, this is a special day because Kelly Young appears to be watching live. Key Rice, 20 minutes in and you're still doing introductions. That has to be a new record. We're doing introductions while we talk about other things, smart ass. Thank you. Alan Baxter, last but not least.
Hi. Yeah, I'm wearing a hat because I haven't had a haircut. We've just come out of 3 months of lockdown. And I've got more hair than I've had in a decade, but I normally look like Clay. So I'm wearing a hat instead because I look ridiculous at the moment. I'm a writer of all sorts of stuff. In fact, for anybody who's watching, those are my books there on that shelf. My latest is The GULP, which is weird cosmic horror set in an Australian harbour town where everything is very weird. The town's called Gulpepper, but the locals call it the Gulp because it has a habit of swallowing people. And that came out earlier this year. So, and I'm currently working on a sequel. So there's 5 novellas in there that are sort of mosaic, interlinked. And I'm currently working on the next volume, which is hopefully coming out early next year, which is another set of 5, and the 2 together make this kind of series of 10 stories that tell a whole bigger story. This is the idea. I need to pull it off. I'm working on the last of the stories now, which is proving I've set myself all kind of traps and I keep falling into them. So I'm kind of hating past me at the moment, but otherwise I'm coping. And I've got a new book out in December, the 30 Eli Carver supernatural thriller. It started with that one with Manifest Recall. About a hitman who's haunted by ghosts of the people he's killed, and he gets in all kinds of mayhem. And there's the third one of those, which also goes crazy cosmic. this time around. That's coming out
Oh,
from Brand
nice.
in December. So yes, it's like that with Manifest Recall. It's very ambiguous to how supernatural it was. The second one was that one, which is Recall Night, which is Eli Carver sort of trying to ignore the supernatural and just kind of get on with his mayhem. And then the third one is Ghost Recall in December, and that basically he just goes, yeah, okay, life is a weird mess and everything is strange and everything goes completely cosmic mayhem. So there's absolutely no ambiguity left by the end of the third one. So
It reminds me a bit of the Charlie Parker series by John Connolly, where it starts off as a regular detective series, and as you go in, the ambiguity slowly goes away.
Yeah, it's a
about
bit
the
like that.
supernatural.
Like with Manifest Recall, you could kind of easily sort of think, well, are they really ghosts or is it just his psyche breaking down? But yeah, they're shorter books and it comes around quicker. But it's a bit like that Charlie Parker thing, and yeah, it's there's no doubt really as the story goes on. So
Now, I don't remember how it happened, but I have two cool guests on today. So I kind of I'm going to go back and forth maybe a little bit instead of, having one of you just sit there the whole time. And I'd like to start off with this. I noticed, Clay, that you were on a panel a while back. I didn't get to see it yet. And the name of the panel was Write What Scares You. Since you're both here, I'd love it if you and Alan, you can start, Clay, could just briefly talk about that. Not the panel itself, but about what is it about writing what scares you. And if you want to comment too, Alan, that's your choice. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Thank goodness you're not grilling us on panels from months back, because I feel like there's a Zoom blur at this point that I don't know if I would be able to.
Well, you don't even have to remember what you said on the panel. You can just say you can just talk about what scares you and why you write it.
I mean, I will say that the older I've gotten, and the more I've written, the more honest I've kind of become with what scares me. And I think maybe kind of when I was in, when I was starting off and the things that I was writing, I really kind of rebelled or resisted that notion of write what you know. And I always wanted to kind of like, hop in that time machine and go back to that first English teacher, whoever said it, and, ask, like, rather than say, write what you know, maybe it's more about write what you feel, just kind of shift the kind of experiential to something a little bit more internal. But what writing what scares you kind of the catalyst to that, I feel like, I'm a father now. I have two sons. The world got a lot scarier for me because there was this odd kind of like, I don't know, like skin in the game, where it wasn't so much that like something shifted for me, like I still love writing about monsters and, zombies and slashers and anything in between. But for some reason, having kids kind of like grounded my personal writing into something, because I'm casting my own children in like my personal horror movies every day that I wake up. And it's because, they're going out into the world, and there's nothing more terrifying for me, frankly, than the idea of them being out there and me being kind of utterly powerless to protect them against everything and anything.
I could not agree more.
Yeah, that's something for me too. Since I became a parent, like people say, "What do you're a horror writer? What are you most scared of?" It's like, well, actually, I'm most scared of not being able to protect my son from something. Like there used to be all sorts of other things, and now there's nothing more frightening to me than that. So it kind of changes your perspective.
Yeah. It's still, the beast, the kind of whatever the kind of the monster itself is, that remains the same. But there's something, I don't know, like the thing that is at stake, kind of that changed for me. And I don't know, like I feel like at least with Whisper Down the Lane, which is all about, it starts off, it's like dual perspectives of a boy who's 5 years old and an adult, a man who is kind of married into a family where he's now a father. And just this idea that, like, I don't know, there's nothing more terrifying to me than parenthood, either on the receiving end as a son or on the the giving end as a father.
I have to say that when you've been through a lot, then nothing much scares you, because most of the bad has happened to you, or at least a lot of the bad. And then, it became clear to me after a few years that there are two things that scare me: something happening to my wife or something happening to my son. Everything else is just, I don't pay attention to, but those two things, you're absolutely right.
I think it's interesting too, though, because like we have this kind of mentality that, look, I'll be all right, I'll take care of myself, I'm worried what's going to happen to them. I do try to remind myself, well, they kind of probably feel the same way as well. You have to kind of trust in the agency and the smarts of the people around you. People survive, they're going to survive too with any luck. So it's it's a tough thing to do, but I think I often find myself sort of second guessing and going, you know what, kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. As long as they've got somewhere safe and know they're loved, more often than not they can get through anything. So I remind myself of this anyway in the hope that it's true.
Kim Smeltzer on the live show just commented, "This is why I prefer supernatural horror. I like my monsters to be nice and impossible and limited to the screen." I kind of feel that way myself. I like supernatural horror. I love Scream. Don't get me wrong. Loved Halloween 1 and 2, for example. But they're the exceptions as far as real life stuff that could, I'm not sure how real life Halloween is, but you know what I mean. Anything else to add, or you guys want to move on?
Well, I kind of wanted to ask,
Yes.
So I know you both talked about sort of, putting that fear of, for family or for people you care about into your work. Would you say that drives, like when you're coming up with the idea or writing the piece, does that drive it? Or would you say that's sort of like what you notice about it once you're done, and that's maybe not the animating force that you're aware of, during?
I think for me, it's definitely something that comes through thematically later. A lot of the time with the stuff that I do, I seem to always circle around these ideas around consequences and decisions and justice and injustice. That tends to be sort of common themes through the work that I do, and things happening to people that that it's not fair and they can't do anything about, and they're facing these ridiculous odds. And, like you live in a weird town like the GULP, and just crazy stuff just happens all the time, and you just try to survive it. And then, decisions that you make have repercussions and so on. So those tend to be the themes I tend to follow, but I think that just kind of feeds back into that concept of trying to protect the ones that you can protect and put yourself between them and the monsters or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyone have an opinion on Kelly Young before we go on?
Kelly Young is a remarkable young man who should be given all the kudos that he deserves.
He deserves. He's going to be on the show in a few weeks anyway, so I do think a lot of Kelly, even though we rib each other a lot. So let me read you a few blurbs, folks. This is about a young man by the name of Alan Baxter. Here we go. This is why you should be reading Alan Baxter. Alan Baxter can take horror from gonzo to heartbreaking in an instant. Good stuff. Alan Baxter can write like a M************. Gail Simone, best-selling author of DC's Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman, and more. Alan Baxter is an accomplished storyteller who ably evokes magic and menace. Laird Barron. Baxter delivers the horror goods. Paul Tremblay. Alan Baxter is one of the best horror writers in the business. Keelan Patrick Burke. I could go on and keep embarrassing him, but that gives you some idea.
I've been very lucky. People have said some very nice things.
Well, you know, you're talented too, so they're well deserved, and you work hard. So, you know, I noticed something about you and Clay too, as I was refreshing my memory on your websites themselves. You both seem to have very organized minds, because Alan's like got all his books laid out very nicely by, like, here are the novellas, here are the novels, here's this genre, here's this genre, here's this series, and so on and so forth. And then Clay organized them by year. Okay, here's what's going on this in 21 and 20. So, you know, I thought that was pretty cool. Organized in different ways. I'm very fascinated by stories about small towns that are strange, that strange things happen in. You know, what's the basic there? Twin Peaks, Stephen King's towns, things like that.
Greystone Bay.
Beg your pardon?
Greystone Bay.
Yes, Charles L. Grant. That kind of thing. Thanks for mentioning Charles Grant. Love him. So you have a series. How many is out now? The first one?
With the GULP, you mean?
Yes, the GULP. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the first one came out in January.
Okay.
Been working on the second set of tales now, so that hopefully will be out in the first quarter of next year sometime.
All right. I'd like to read the synopsis, if that's okay.
Sure.
Strange things happen in the GULP. The residents have gotten used to it. The isolated Australian harbour town of Culpeper is not like other places. Some maps don't even show it. Nice touch. I like that. And only outsiders use the full name. Everyone who lives there calls it the GULP. The place has a habit of swallowing people. And this is a book with 5 either novellas or short stories, depending, I guess.
Yeah, there's 5 stories. They're each between sort of 10, 20,000 words. So it's sort of novelette to novella territory. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. A truck driver thinks the stories about the GULP are made up to scare him until he gets there. Teenage siblings try to cover up the death of their mother, but their plans go drastically awry. A rock band invites 4 backpackers to a party at their house where things get dangerously out of control. A young man loses a drug shipment, and his boss gives him 48 hours to make good on his mistake. Under the unblinking eye of the old lighthouse, a rock fisher makes the strangest catch of his life. 5 descents into darkness. Welcome to the GULP, where nothing is as it seems. Can you talk about the genesis of this fictional town, Alan?
Sure. It's a weird sort of process. So, and it's partly to due to the pandemic as well. So, at the end of God, what even year is it? So around the end of 2019, for a joke, basically, I ended up writing a novella called The Roo, which is basically about a demonic kangaroo that just decimates an outback town and just causes mayhem. It was just a B-movie creature feature novella that was kind of written for a bit of a joke. But it became really popular. It all started because Keelan Burke mocked up this cover from a news article about a kangaroo terrorizing a small town. And then everybody started saying someone's got to write that story and be in the token Australian. Everybody hassled me until I agreed to do it. But then it actually became a really popular book. People really enjoyed it, which was fantastic. And that made me think, well, maybe there really is enough interest in sort of Australian small town horror, because I'd always wanted to, whenever I do write, even when I write sort of thrillers like the Alex Kane series and stuff like that, there's always throwbacks to Australia somewhere in it. I always try to draw that up because, you know, there's plenty of American and British sort of settings and characters and whatever else. So I always try to draw at least some reference to Australia, even if it's not featured in Australia. It's probably only the Eli Carver books that don't do that. And for a long time, I'd wanted to create basically a Castle Rock or an Innsmouth or whatever of my own that was Australian. And I did the outback town with the Roo, but I've always had this fascination with harbour towns. I live near a harbour town in the country. I'm about 2 hours south of Sydney. So I live in dairy country, and there's a harbour town 10 minutes down the road. And there's all that sort of small town weirdness. And I love that. And I'd always wanted to sort of create this playground I could come back to and write stories there and revisit from different angles, maybe set novels nearby or write new stories in the town and whatever else. And I wasn't sure how much, whether it really had legs or not. But then after the success of the Roo, and everybody was really, and it was that you can't get more Australian than that. Like I filled it with as much Australian slang as I could, and it was unashamedly just ochre. And people really responded to it. So I just decided, well, you know what, I might do it. And so I started being a bit more serious about these ideas I had for this harbour town, which is basically, like the description says, it's an isolated harbour town. It's a bit weird. A lot of people don't even sort of realize it's there. And then it was right about then as well that the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, because my sort of day job, I run a martial arts academy, I teach Kung Fu. So all of a sudden I had to figure out how to shift that to online delivery, because we went into lockdown. I suddenly had my son at home, and we had to figure out homeschooling and all that sort of thing. Everything just turned crazy. And so I couldn't really keep my head around bigger novel size projects because there was too much going on, but I had to keep working. And so I just decided, okay, well, this is sort of a congruence of events here. I'm going to write these shorter stories that I've had in mind, because I knew they weren't short stories. I knew they weren't like 5,000 words. They were longer stories, but they weren't novels. And I figured, right, so I sat down and I started writing these stories set in the GULP. And by the end of the year, by the time I'd done the first couple, I kind of realized where I was going with the first set of 5, and it just kind of coalesced, and I could write one at a time and keep smaller ideas in my head and link them together. And by the end of the year, I had the first set of 5 stories, and that came out in January. So it sort of came from all these sort of different influences, but mostly from wanting a setting that was very Australian and very weird, and where I could explore this kind of weird Antipodean sort of cosmic horror vibes, as well as small town horror and weird small town residents and all that sort of stuff. I just love getting my teeth into that in terms of stories. So the sort of characters you get.
You are not going to own up to basing this off of the Strange Calls?
Off of what, sorry?
The Strange Calls. Are you familiar?
No, I don't know. So I can definitely not. I can definitely claim.
I'm kidding, of course, but the Strange Calls lasted 1 season. It's like 8 episodes, and it's this crazy Australian off the wall about this young policeman who arrives in this town, and at night these weird things happen. They get these weird calls, and it's not really it's one of those strange towns like yours, but it's a comedy.
Oh wow!
Okay, with a dash of horror, but a very small dash. It's very quirky and offbeat. A lot of people might not like it, but I just think it's funny as hell.
Okay, so, I'm writing it down. I'm definitely going to look that up. I hadn't seen that, but that sounds like it's right up my alley.
Yeah, the Strange Calls.
Okay.
No, I was kidding, but no, I love towns like that. I love the GULP, so yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
I'd always wanted to do it and never really got round to it. And then those events kind of made me go, you know what, I am going to do this. And subsequently, I've already got a first draft of a novel that's set near there that doesn't have anything to do with the GULP, but for anybody who's kind of paying attention, they'll be like, oh, and they'll see like a couple of reference to place names, and I just get to play with those Easter eggs and stuff, which is just fun,
Now, if you're watching or if you're listening later, I do have links to Alan's website, Alan's book, The GULP, same thing with Clay, etc. I've got a link to Pete's book, by the way. We'll talk about different books that I've got links to. But alanbaxter.com, folks, if you go there, you can
.com.au.
I beg your pardon?
alanbaxter.com.au. alanbaxter.com is someone else who won't sell me the domain.
Oh, really?
So it's alanbaxteronline.com or
alanbaxteronline.com. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm looking right at it too.
They point to the same place. So
yeah. alanbaxteronline.com.
Yeah, that'll do.
And if you go there, like I said, he's got a very organized list of his books. Frankly, my taste would be, if you haven't read any, start with a GULP. But you can kind of look at them and go, oh, this is more to my taste, or that's more to my taste, and start this or there. So I want to come back to you in a minute to talk about some of the rest of your books, Alan.
Sure.
But for now, I want to switch over to Clay for a few minutes. I hope you guys don't mind the back and forth. I just think it'd be more fun this way.
No worries.
And all the rest of you, please jump in with a question anytime you want. And hi, Melissa. How are you? Melissa just joined us. Tell us about the genesis of Whisper Down the Lane and what it's about, Clay, because any of us who lived through it we're familiar with the, especially in America, we're familiar with the Satanic Panic in the 80s. And your book is about that. Can you talk about your book and maybe a spoiler-free synopsis of it?
Sure. I mean, Whisper Down the Lane it takes place in two separate timelines. There's early 80s and I say like 2013. And the 1983 section is, it all takes place from the point of view of a 5-year-old by the name of Sean. Sean,
Really?
Yeah. He has
no, I knew that. I've read the book, but I just thought I'd go on. I'm sorry, go on.
Sean, he lives with his mom. It's just the two of them. They're kind of struggling to get by. And Sean essentially kind of tells a little white lie that's coerced through circumstances. He fibs about his kindergarten teacher. And that lie kind of ripples out to his family, ripples out to his school, to his community, to the state, and it kind of dovetails.
It's a Satanic Panic fib, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's a big old Satan fib. Where did you get that bruise? Who did that to you? Was it your teacher? Was it your teacher? Tell me. At a certain point, when you do your deep dive into, the McMartin School trial and the kind of real life events of the time, you see how much these children who were basically kind of told to lie or coerced into lying about, is your kindergarten teacher practicing member of a satanic cult?
It sounds insane today, doesn't it? But it absolutely was real and happened.
It's funny because yes, it is insane and it sounds impossible.
But yet, what's insane is that so many people believed it.
So many people believed it. And like today, there is a pretty thorough cross-section of members of our country who believe that there is a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. that has a base, in its basement is, a practicing torture dungeon for a, Satan worshiping politician cult. It's that we have musicians who are, making videos that with them bumping and grinding with the devil, and that's kind of morally corrupting our youth. And with Whisper Down the Lane, I think the point that I'm trying to make is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The devil, true. He always finds his way. Which when you dovetail the story into 2013, we come upon another character, a man by the name of Richard, not Sean, Richard. Sorry, Sean. He is newly married. He's an art teacher at a elementary school. He is kind of the cool teacher, quirky teacher. But what starts to happen is the lies that 5-year-old Sean told in 1983 are suddenly happening for real in 2013 to Richard. and you start to kind of see these two narratives kind of intertwine and coalesce. And you know, for every fib that this little boy tells 30 years ago, they start to come true, you know, for this poor art teacher. And you start to realize why. So that's a relatively spoiler-free synopsis on the book.
I see readers posting online, various social media, about how they, you know, just finished the book, and you know, it was scary as hell and creepy, you know. So
yeah, yeah, it's been interesting to see how people respond to it. You know, it's a I think it's kind of a love it or hate it kind of book. It tends to
really,
not be
you think
what
so?
people, I mean, maybe it's my bias of how I read my Goodreads reviews, but you know, like it is.
Don't
it
ever
is
read
interesting.
those.
I can't help it.
I get-
It's a bad habit, and I do it, and I have to cop to it because it's not good, but I do it. And it you know, there's no other reason than just to kind of like have the, you know, the early morning laceration off, you know, against the back of like,
oh
"So
yeah,
what's
you
happening tonight?"
you definitely want to go to church each morning and you know, flog yourself if you can.
I start my day off that way. It's like right before I write, it's like, I'm going to humble, like, you know, like I wake up, like, you know, the world is my oyster. How am I going to start the day? I'm going to hop on Goodreads for just 3 seconds. Look how that like pristine 5-star review just like gradually decays down to like, you know, 4 stars, 3.94 stars, 3.55 stars. And
You know, I rarely look. I edited a book called Autumn Cthulhu, and I rarely look at reviews, but since I wanted to mention it later today because it's that time of year, you know, I have a lot of good reviews on it. And then I see there's a recent review from some guy who apparently doesn't like me, and talking about how he can resell the book if he wants to, you know, some line in there that got into the print version instead of the staying in the Kindle version, you know, just a slight mistake. And, you know, these hobbyists with crappy writers in their anthologies who make bank, that's a quote on a book. I'm like, I made bank? When did when did this happen? But it's like, yeah, those reviews, yeah.
Isn't it amazing though that you can practically remember for verbatim the scathing reviews, but I would say probably for every 5-star review you've gotten, you can't, if I asked you to recite, you know, your most positive review, that would be more challenging than your most negative.
I think it had something to do with my gray hair, and you know, Scott Thomas said something similar to me one time. He got a 1-star review on a book of his. He's a brilliant writer. His writing is just soaked in autumn, if you've never read him, and October and that sort of thing. But you know, it kind of bothered him, and you know, we're all human. And I said, Scott, go to the best classic book you'll ever, you know, War and Peace. I mean, name something that's just everybody agrees this is a absolutely fantastic book, and you're going to find 1-star reviews on Amazon. Yeah. You know, so it doesn't matter. You know,
to kind of, I guess, better myself, I usually go to the books that mean the most to me. Like, what is my favorite book? And I read those reviews, and I'll just be like, oh my God, like it is amazing how personal reading can be for us. And it's like, my 5-star book is your 1-star book, and that's great. That's okay. Like that's, you know, we live in this world where we can all have different, you know, opposing views on the same books. But I do not begrudge anybody, you know, if they don't like my stuff. Like I almost feel like I would rather have the 1-star review than the 3-star review, which is kind of, or the 2-star review, which is like, you know, like the apathy to me is the worst. Like
I think as a publisher and an editor, the only complaints or 1-star, 2-star reviews that I mind are the ones that aren't really about the content of the book. They're personal towards the author or the writers or whatnot. You know, I mean,
Well,
author
they're
or
talking
the
about
editor or
shipping.
whatever, you
They
know.
give it 1 star because it arrived with a scratched cover or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've sold
Just-
books on 1-star reviews, though. I know. I had one book. I got a 1-star review that just said gratuitously unpleasant, 1 star. And I know damn well I sold a lot of copies off the back of that review because that's people like, oh, it sounds cool.
Then you got the guys who write 5-star reviews, arrived exactly on time, 5 stars. Okay, I'll take it.
I remember when David Lynch's Lost Highway came out, and very polarized movie. The people who loved it, the people who hated it. But
Right.
the ad campaigns were amazing because they print the print advertisements in the newspapers would be, these are all the bad reviews and these are all the good reviews. And that was a conscious decision on their part on how to market the film, of like,
I didn't know that. That's cool.
I thought it was great. I feel like I want to take a page from Lynch and just say that, like, if this person can say this, but this person can say something completely opposite, then it just negates everything. I would rather have that kind of discourse or that kind of argument, those diametrically opposed viewpoints, than just the kind of like, I don't care enough to have an opinion.
Yeah.
So years
Sean,
ago.
Yes, Pete, please.
Years ago, I picked up a copy of, and Mike's heard this before, picked up a copy of the first edition of
Heard all your stories before.
William S. Burroughs' The Wild Boys. And the blurb across the front from the Village Voice was, more lucid than naked lunch. And
That is saying something.
This is the best you can come up with. More lucid than naked lunch.
That is a blurb. That is somebody phoned in that blurb.
You are.
I didn't read the book. What can I think of?
Yeah.
What was that movie? Was it the movie that they made years ago for the Cray twins or something, where they basically had a movie poster with the twins in the front standing next to each other, and behind the twins were all the 5-star reviews, and right in the middle between them were just 2 stars, and underneath it said The Guardian. And it looked like, because they were close together, that it was just covering up the rest of the stars, but it actually was a 2-star review from The Guardian. But they just listed it along, so it looked like it was a 5-star review from The Guardian along with everyone else.
Hilarious.
No, there was just 2 stars. You can.
What movie was this?
Call them out.
The Craze.
Go for the graphic design.
What was it? Sorry. The movie.
The Cray twins, I think.
Okay. All right.
If you find the movie, I think it was the Craze, I think is what they called it. I can't remember. I think it was that one. But you find the movie poster and you'll see right between the 2 heads are just 2 stars, and underneath The Guardian, but it's designed to look like it's 5 along with everything else.
Mr. Sean Hamill, would you like to throw
Yes.
some questions at Clay? Bridget, did you have something to say first? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I just said genius. But it also reminds me of that meme where it's got the one guy on the top is like 45%, drama on Rotten Tomatoes, and then it's like 45% horror on Rotten Tomatoes. Big thumbs up. It's like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad when it's horror, because it's just different people's cup of tea.
Or when I look at the weather report, 51% chance of rain, not an exact analogy, but I'm like, you don't fucking know if it's going to rain or not. Just say so,
Usually that means it's going to rain 45% of the day. That's what I've learned.
Sean.
I mean, well, so yeah, just to chime in on that, I think that horror and comedy, maybe more than any other genre, seem to be like the most subjective and personal, and
built around emotion.
Yeah, and it's much harder to get a read on whether you'll like a horror movie or a comedy based on just glancing at a Rotten Tomatoes score, I think. But I guess this is a question for both Alan and Clay, just to kind of build on what we were talking about with reviews and Goodreads. So at a certain point, I just stopped going to my Goodreads page, but I also just have the one book, and it's 2 years old. like, for example, with the remaking, Clay, like, or with the Rue, Alan, you know, like, are you still looking at those, or do you let it go at a certain point? You're only looking at the last thing that came out.
I I look. I don't look at everything, and I don't look every day. I've moved on from the remaking. And I think I want to preface this a bit more by saying I do like conversations that people have. You know, I feel like it's a blessing if anybody wants to write a review about anything I've written. Like, that to me feels miraculous, frankly, whether it's positive, negative, or otherwise. But I feel like there's a part of me when a book first comes out, and maybe for the first few months, where I'm still trying to understand how I feel about the book and what I think the book is about, and what the whole, like, there's almost like a kind of like I need the decompression period where someone other than me has to kind of tell me what the hell this book is. And it's not that I go to the reviews to tell me that, as much as sometimes there can be an articulation or someone discovers something in the book that, well, it might not be something that was like within my agenda or in the goal of writing it, but it's an interesting kind of like, it just kind of shows the complexity of the book. And that to me feels very exciting. I don't have it's weird, and I'm kind of showing probably my lack of talent here, but like I feel like I don't necessarily understand the book. I'm not necessarily the best person to kind of articulate what these books are about, but then have a period of like distance from it and kind of talk to other people outside of the experience of writing it. Even if that's just me reading a review, it can be, this is what this book meant to me. This is why I hate this book so much. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, that's really, it's just interesting to me. And it helps me understand.
I'm sorry, Clay, to interrupt, but I don't think it has anything to do with lack of talent, because, you know, look, objectively, you have a lot of talent. You're a great writer. I think it's more, you know, Laird says something to the effect of, once you send a book out, it's no longer yours. It belongs to the reader. You know, of course it's yours. You own it. That's not what he meant. But the meanings and everything, it's subjective to each reader. It belongs to them. If that makes sense. He said it better than that, but
I agree with that. Like, there's the old adage that whatever a reader thinks your book is about, they're right, because it's their story. So yeah. I mean, unlike Clay, I pay attention to reviews. I enjoy looking at it. Partly it's because it's kind of just fascinating to see how something's received. Partly it's to make sure it's being received. It's like, please God, are people talking about this? Is anybody reading it?
Especially if it's a small press, you want to get those reviews, at least a couple of good reviews out there, so that when people look at the book, they're like, oh yeah, somebody else has read it. You know,
that's it. And every once in a while I'll think, oh, you know, I haven't said anything about this book for a while, so I might just go and grab a screenshot and say, you know, like 4.5 average on Goodreads, give it a look, because that stuff can be useful, you know. So people people respond to that. Like, I can tell you how great my book is all the time, and people are like, well, yeah, of course you're going to think that. It's way more powerful when other people say how good a book is. So this is why I'm always sort of exhorting people, please talk about the books you love. If you don't enjoy a book, don't worry about it. You don't have to tell anyone. But if you do enjoy a book, please tell people, because there's nothing more powerful than that.
You know, that's why
the thing we can do is kind of grab that second party stuff like reviews from Amazon, from Goodreads, whatever, and share that out and go, look, other people are enjoying this. So, you know, I reckon you should give it a go. So, you know, I do pay attention to that. And
I like what you said, especially, I have a rule, especially about, you know, if you say, hey, I don't really care for Stephen King's latest book, you know, first of all, Stephen King's got the maturity that if he ever saw my comment or whatever, he'd be like, hey, that's cool, whatever. I'm not going to hurt Stephen King. You know what I mean? No matter what I say. And not that I would want to, but that's my point is, you know, he's an established author, very established. But, you know, if someone's fairly new, no matter who you are, and especially if you're somebody that, you know, you got a podcast, people listen to you and everything, I like what you just said about if you like the book, say something. And my rule is if I don't like the book, I really don't say anything, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just me. Because it's subjective.
Yeah, and I will always say that to people: if you're not enjoying a book, put it down and go to something else. Life's too short. That applies to my stuff too. If you're reading something of mine and you don't like it, no worries, go somewhere else, because don't waste your time feeling like you got to slog through something. But if you do enjoy something, then the best favor you can do an author is to tell other people about it and go, hey, this was great.
As an author or an editor or a publisher, it's not wise to respond to reviews at all. It's unprofessional. But if you did, just with you three guys in mind, I would say Sean would be like, yeah, who cares what you think? Stephen King loved it. And
We're all waiting for that Stephen King endorsement. We all want that tweet. Come on, Steve.
Well, Clay could say, yeah, who cares what you think? Elijah Wood loves it. And and you could say, you know, what? Who cares what you think? Keelan Patrick Burt, Paul Tremblay loved it. So go, you know, you don't know anything. But it's subjective.
There is some strength in that. There is some. It does help to keep you going. You know, no matter what people say. When people you respect say nice stuff about your work, it's powerful. It pushes you on.
And I do want to say that I did obsessively check my Goodreads page for months. I had to step away from my mental health, so I'm not trying to put myself above anybody else. And I also use Goodreads for my own reading and try to use it to spread the word about stuff that I am enjoying. So that wasn't trying to be a slight against Goodreads. It's just about you know.
No, it's a valuable service. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I post everything I read on Goodreads if I enjoy it. If I read a book and I don't enjoy it, nobody knows I read it. Right. But if it's a 3-star or above read for me, I put it on Goodreads, because then if anybody pays attention to it, they can see me 3, 4, or 5-starring the stuff that I enjoy. So yeah. And I don't tend to write reviews. Usually I don't tend to write much about it. I just kind of post it with a star rating. But yeah, there's a strange kind of divide being an author on Goodreads. I think Goodreads is very much a reader space. So I try to tread very lightly there, but you know, I also think it's important to have some presence there.
I think, yeah, very well put. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I use it to keep track of what I read. I don't star any reviews. I just kind of say I read it. And therefore, like, I have this kind of long sprawling document that says, oh, these are the books I read this year. And it kind of allows me a place to kind of keep tabs on books.
Do you have it like automatically, like send to Twitter? I gave this book 4 stars, that kind of thing. I know some people
used
do that.
to, but not anymore.
Yeah,
I have all that stuff turned off. I don't like that auto posting thing.
Yeah. Okay. Pete, Melissa, Bridget, Matt, Rick, you guys have any questions for these two before we go on?
So I was going to comment that, you know, I write a lot of book reviews for the eZine and for the New York Review of Science Fiction. And I've run into these issues where I've absolutely hated books and they've won Hugos. And I've absolutely hated a book and had to figure out how to publish a review of it without pissing off someone that I work with. You know,
well, if it's me, you don't have to publish.
Yeah, there's nothing worse. You know, reading a book and hating it, writing a bad review about a book you don't come in contact with the writer. That's easy.
Yeah.
You know, it's just your opinion. You could be wrong, but if you write a review about someone you like, you're in contact with and goes to all the same conventions as you do, you know, and who like edits magazines and anthologies that you might want to be involved in, you got to find a new way to, you know, there are a lot of pen names out there. Yeah. You just got to move forward. But yeah.
Clay, Whisper Down the Lane. Please, everyone speaking to the audience, please pick this book up and read it. It's amazing. Could you, someone's read Whisper Down the Lane already. Tell the audience what maybe should they go to next. A few of your other books.
You know, my next book doesn't come out until September of 2022. So that's on the horizon. So if we're going back,
can you say anything about it as of yet?
I just found the title. I know the title now,
Okay.
but I can't say the title.
All right.
But
isn't that wonderful, Clay? When you find the title, you know what your title's going to be. And
for 2 years, it was this.
You heard it. Yeah, you heard it here first. Clay has a book that
the title
we know nothing about coming out in 11
months. It has a title.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pete, it was amazing. Like there's just this feeling of like, for so long it was this nebulous thing. And like I guess I can say this. It's a supernatural book. It's a ghost story. And
Ooh.
I wanted to call it Get Haunted. And my editor was kind of like, okay, like, great. We'll get back to you on that one. But for the longest time, we just called it Get Haunted. Let's get haunted, everybody. And it was this kind of running thing of like, yeah, let's get haunted. And it kind of started to work in a weird way for me personally, where I was like, yeah, let's actually call it Get Haunted. And my editor would just be like, no. And like,
it's really close to Get Fucked. Yeah.
I mean, it works in a lot of ways. So in my defense, without giving anything away, it could have been a great title for the book, but and then you give them like the whole list of like, well, it could be this, that, like just basically going through the thesaurus and be like, well, maybe it's this. And then like for 2 years, we just kind of like didn't have a title. And then last week, my editor was like, what about this? And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like my editor found the title, and I owe her everything. I love her.
Nice to have another pair of eyes on things, another pair of expert eyes,
Yeah. It took my complete failure to find the title for us to find the title, and I'm very happy. And I hope to share that title with you one day soon. I just
awesome.
Can't. Right. But you should read the remaking, which came out in 2019. It's about it's a ghost story told 4 different ways. So imagine a 1950s campfire story that gets made into a movie in the 1970s, that then gets remade into a Scream style slasher in the 1990s, and then turns into a true crime podcast in the 2000s. So it just constantly kind of evolves as technology evolves, and keeps going.
And what I'm seeing now is like there's a Scream television series, and now I Know What You Did Last Summer is a television series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We are in an age of content where narrative is so elastic and it has no barrier whatsoever anymore. So a story, it never ends, it never dies. And this can be great, but it is also, because it shows you the kind of durability of our myths and our legends and our ghosts, but it also shows a very craven quality towards our, whoever's in charge of kind of making these decisions, and who gets to kind of say, this is the next thing you're going to imbibe.
Yeah, as a kid, I read those Lois Duncan books and I loved them. I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I watched the first episode of this. And I'm like, I don't think that has anything to do with the book.
Yeah.
Kelly Young is still watching, and he actually came up with my next question that I was going to ask anyway, that we should ask you about a short film called Late Bloomer.
Okay. Is there a question to it, or is it just
that's it?
Talk just Late Bloomer? Oh,
yeah,
man.
It's free on YouTube, right?
Yeah, it's out there.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear a funny story?
Sure, I do.
The director of the short film Late Bloomer directed the first episode of the TV series I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I am not lying.
That's a nice
I am not
segue. I love that.
I am. That is. I will. I will leave it at that. But
Well, why don't you
yeah.
talk about The Boy then? Because Elijah Wood's production company, made that film possible, right?
Yeah. No. Terrible segue again. The director of The Boy is also the director of Late Bloomer, who also directed the
You are
pilot
kidding
episode
me.
of. I'm not.
You're never
I'm
going to
not-
get rid of this person.
Craig and I are really good friends.
Okay. Well, then you
we
don't
make
want to get
stuff
rid of
together.
this person.
No. We're thick as thieves.
Okay.
We first did the short Late Bloomer, and then we did another short called.
Did I say
Emily.
something negative about I Know What You Did Last Summer? Because if I did, I take it back.
Your secret's safe with me.
Actually, I'm probably going to keep watching it because as different as it is kind of fascinating. So, but anyway, talk about The Boy.
The Boy is about a, when you go see these slasher films and, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, there's always the pre-credit teaser where it's like, this is the origin story of Jason Voorhees, or this is how Freddy Krueger became Freddy Krueger. We thought it would be rather interesting to take those 2 minutes and kind of crack that open into a feature-length film. So we have The Boy is essentially the kind of origin story of someone who will one day become the next Jason Voorhees or the next, Freddy Krueger, the next Michael Myers. But we only see that person as a 9-year-old child. You kind of see the confluence of like all of these events, domestic, circumstantial, all the things that kind of lead to this bad seed becoming
more of a nurture versus nature type.
I mean, the argument's there. What is that kind of innate kind of sociopathy versus like, if he was nudged in this direction, would it be a completely different story? Or because of circumstances, he gets pushed that way.
Yeah.
But it was a feature. I wrote a novel in 2003 called Miss Corpus. And there was this one chapter called The Henley Road Motel. And that chapter was all about a little boy named Ted Henley who lives in this road motel with his dad. And they try to like make, their business is failing. And so this boy kind of comes up with a get rich quick scheme to like bring customers back. And Craig, this director, said, I want to turn that into a movie. And so we made a short film of it. It was like 10 minutes, really kind of like maxed out all the credit cards to do it.
Sure.
Got into Sundance, got seen. And because of that, Elijah Wood's production company, Spectre Vision, saw it. And they said, we want to turn this into a feature. Can it be a feature? And we said, yes. And as a matter of fact, here's the script for it.
You don't really say no to that kind of thing.
Oh, no. Never.
So that's how you bumped into Elijah Wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it was great. It was amazing. Like it was a super low budget movie. They got David Morse, amazing actor. Ray Nielsen.
Is, yeah.
It was phenomenal. It's a beautiful film. Craig loves his Terrence Malick, and there are some ponderous shots of nature in there, but it's basically just the like, who will this boy become, and you get to see that kind of progression. So if there was, the sequel will be, the boys now Jason.
Yeah. I have not seen it yet. Where can we watch it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's probably like, you could rent it on the platforms there. It's definitely rentable.
Maybe I'll try that Google thing I keep hearing about. So
the last I heard, you could watch it probably for free on Tubi.
With commercials.
Yeah. I think it's on there. It's we suffered. I mean, we had this amazing title, The Boy, that nobody had ever used before. And 6 months after our movie came out in August 2015, and then like January of 2016, this other movie called The Boy came out, which was all about a killer doll, and
Right.
they had a bigger PR budget than we did, so our boy basically now gets consumed and absorbed by that other boy.
Well, I just looked it up. It looks like it's on, you're right, it's on Tubi for free. And it's also on Amazon Prime, and a few other places. You can rent it on Vudu. So yeah. How involved was Elijah Wood with this?
They were hands-on. The Spectre Vision.
I saw your interview with you. He interviewed you like the day before Sean and I did a Patreon podcast with you, and I watched it, and as I've heard from rumors in the internet and everything, he seems like a very nice guy.
I mean, he's amazing. Like, my contact with Hollywood is pretty minimal, but like if you told me that everyone was like Elijah Wood, I would be so happy. He's a gentleman, loves movies. I mean, that's the thing. He loves movies. Like,
loves horror too, obviously, with Spectre Vision,
Oh my God. Their output is phenomenal. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Oh God, yes.
Mandy was amazing.
Yeah.
I personally feel very fortunate to be within that family tree.
I just wish sometimes that Nicolas Cage would come out of his shell a little bit, just let go,
I mean, he did Color Out of Space with them too. So
yeah, I know. I'm kidding.
Mean, it's
so restrained, his performances.
Very restrained actor. And then you see him in a movie like City of Angels, where he's this really restrained, angelic being. And you're like, who is this? Really? Is this the same guy? So yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Alan, so let's say people agree with me and they love the small town stuff, and they start with the GULP, for example. What about from there?
Well, it's a good question. The GULP is a good place to start. I write a lot of short fiction. I've got a couple of short story collections that are published as well, Crow Shine and Served Cold. So if you like short stories, those are good. Actually,
of course, the nice thing about you, Alan Baxter Online, is you really have it. You do really have it organized towards, hey, I want to read novellas, so here I'll read these Alan Baxter books. That sort of, whatever.
I mean, I kind of made that because I kept getting the question, where do I start? And you can kind of read anything. There's a couple of series, so it's obviously good to start at the beginning of a series, but otherwise you can go in anywhere you like. This is Devouring Dark is a standalone novel. It's got some of my favorite cover art too, so I always like showing that off. It's just mad. That one is a good place to start because that's a standalone novel. I wrote a story, oh God, I can't remember, 2015, 16. It won me one of those Demon Heads up there, Australian Shadows Award for short story. And I knew that story had more to go. So Devouring Dark is kind of a novel that's like a sequel to that story. And the story is actually, the publisher put the short story in the back of the novel too. So that's another good place to go because a lot of what I do has like crime and sort of mystery and a little bit edging on police procedural, as well as a horror, urban horror and all that sort of stuff. So Devouring Dark's a kind of a good introduction to that vibe. It's set in London. It's like a London gangster novel with a Scottish and an Australian sort of dual protagonist, and it's kind of a study on death and justice and all those other things I was talking about before. So that's another good place to go because it's a full novel, but it's a standalone, so it's a good place to start if you want something a bit meatier. And sure. I used to do a lot more sort of the weird, dark, urban fantasy, magical stuff before, like the Alex Kane series and Hidden City and books like that. So if people are more into that sort of more magical kind of vibe, but then it's all pretty dark. But then the more recent stuff, I tend to lean more into horror and supernatural and things like that as well. And again, if you like the crime and the organized crime, the Eli Carver novella series is a good place to go. So the third one of those is about to come out. So that's something else people can follow in. It's really one of those things you can kind of drop in anywhere you like and see where you go. Devouring Dark or the Gulp are good places to start though, because they give a good sort of showcase of the sort of thing that I do.
Maybe especially with this audience who we don't all just read horror, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, in particular,
this audience, we read a lot of horror, right? So
yeah,
mostly.
Yeah, I mean, Hidden City would be another good place to go as well, because that plays with sort of cosmic themes and stuff as well, but it's also kind of like more out there. It's a standalone novel, and it's it kind of crosses. I never met a genre I didn't like. I've said this before, so I tend to kind of cram as many as I can into a book. If I can get some crime and some mystery and some horror and some fantasy and some whatever else, I get it all in there and just pack these things out. So
I've got 2 or 3 more questions for you guys, but before I do that, anybody here on the panel today, do you guys have questions or comments? More questions or comments for Alan Baxter or Clay Chapman?
Looked like Rich had something he wanted to ask.
Rich, anything?
Yeah. So for all the writers and editors here on this panel, so we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, but given the discussion about the remake and how the story changed as technology changed throughout the decades, as writers and as editors, what do you guys think about the improvements in AI? Specifically, there's some really powerful AI websites that you can subscribe to that will write a majority of your long form magazine article, novellas, and including novels. And now that big data is really they're beginning to use big data to look at literature. There's a book out, I think it's called Nabokov's Favorite Color is Mauve, what big data can tell you about literature. So, as editors, where do you guys see things going in the future for writing and editing, with when anybody could pull up an AI, write 20% of the story and have the rest of it plunked out by the AI?
Is it all right if I start real quickly?
Sure.
As an editor and small press publisher, as I said before we started, my thought is that it's kind of like the auto-tune thing for when you sing. Anyone can sound great with auto-tune, okay? But they're using auto-tune. There's a new AI art thing that's really, really cool and more than a little creepy. I used it the other day to do a really cool King in Yellow work of art. It is basically text to, hey, draw this. 5 minutes later, it came up with this amazing horror King in Yellow drawing. And same thing with what you're talking about, Rich. I think that, you're absolutely right. This is a concern, but I think it'll be obvious that, maybe not obvious, but somewhat obvious that, hey, this is what this writer is doing. And I compared it to James Patterson, putting out a book every other day. He's basically, what is he doing? He's probably writing outlines, and then these ghostwriters are writing these books. I mean, we all know James Patterson is probably not writing very much in these books. So I view it the same way. And I think it was Pete that said, technology evolves, and as this happens, there'll be a piece of technology that can say, hey, look, this was created by an AI. Don't take credit for it. Take credit for the outline maybe, but that's it. But anyway, that's all I have to say about it. You guys.
For me, I think it is something that's coming up, but a lot of the time, I think once you've been working for a while, I like to think that a lot of the time people will pick up a new book from me because it's an Alan Baxter book, not necessarily, there'll be some people that say, oh, this sounds appealing, or that's a great cover, or whatever, and they'll try it out, and hopefully you gain new readers all the time. But also, hopefully, there are people out there who buy it because it's an Alan Baxter book, the same way you would buy a Clive Barker book or a Stephen King book or whatever. So I'd like to think that you get to a point where you have a voice and you have a sort of a style that people resonate with. So even if AI could do a lot of the work, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't come across. It would be like the written equivalent of, you'd hear the auto tune in the background.
I can't help but think of Milli Vanilli.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd like to think that regardless, you would always have, a style or a voice that's not really, that you can't really replicate without people knowing it's been replicated, rather than it's who the person is. Or at least I hope so, because I mean, my career is in danger if it's not true.
I have an issue here too. It's like, I can get in my car and outrun Usain Bolt because I got a device. You can artificially create music. Like some guy, I heard a story, they had a computer create like 10 jillion melodies, and then they like copyrighted them all or something, so that all these melodies that they did not generate themselves were now copyrighted. And, it's a lot more interesting to watch an actual human competition than some guy on a motorbike outrunning the greatest sprinter in the world, right? Mm-hmm. I just think that there are going to be devices, and who knows, they may help a beginning writer learn to write. We all could use tools to get started, training wheels, what have you. Sure. But eventually what we really want is that human voice, the individuality of it, the truth of it.
So y'all use the music comparison, so now I have to jump in. So
I thought you would, yeah.
So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the program Band in a Box, but it's basically a rhythm section backup kind of situation where you can practice improvising with a guitar player, bass player, drummer, and you can actually input who you want them to be, and the computer will generate a background as if you were playing with those three musicians, supposedly. You can even ask it, I want you to improvise a saxophone solo, aka John Coltrane, and it will improvise saxophone solo. But what is lacking is, yes, you get a measure of G7 that may have been something that John Coltrane would have played, but it does not connect to the next measure of C minor 7. They're just separate thoughts that are generated from stuff that he might have played in that chord. So as a musician, it was interesting for us to practice with that program and to look at it and say, okay, well, that's a cool idea. There's a nugget of something in there that I can maybe use in a solo that actually has an overall arc. And I think it's the same with writing a story. I mean, sure, you may get some little nuggets of ideas in there, but there's something about the human, and especially when you're talking about character development, that we have that ability to see the whole human experience and that whole arc.
As Matt said, learning tools or idea tools or training wheels, depending on what level you're at in your art. So, okay, moving on. Does anyone?
I got a question.
Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rick.
To Alan, what Australian writers influenced you?
You know what? Australia really punches above its weight in terms of, particularly in terms of fantasy and horror. We have some absolutely outstanding writers here. Karen Warren is one of my favorite. We're very good friends, but I always feel kind of self-conscious talking about it because we've known each other so long and so well, but she is genuinely outstanding. She's got a novel. If you haven't read Karen Warren before, check out her novel, The Grief Hole. It's not like something you'll have read before. She's brilliant. Lisa L. Hannett and Angela Slater and Kirsten McDermott, people like that, all write fantastic sort of horror and fantasy fiction. Robert Hood is like the godfather of horror in Australia. He's an amazing writer of ghost stories. He's got a collected volume of ghost stories that's like a doorstop. I can't remember what it's called now, which is embarrassing. It's in the other room. But check out Robert Hood's collected ghost stories. They're fantastic as well.
I
And
was talking to Stuart Onan Allen in a Patreon podcast the other night, and he was talking about the fact that he likes to write. He's an American writer, but he likes to write about places that other people don't really write about as much. And I'm not saying that's Australia, but Americans could certainly stand to be more familiar with Australian horror because there's a lot of good stuff done there.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I really make a point of trying to include Australian influence, even in the books that are more sort of international or that might be set in the US or whatever. I always try to include, Peripheral Visions. Sorry, there's my brain kicking in. Behind that's Robert Hood's ghost story collection. It's called Peripheral Visions. I make a point of, and this again with the GULP, this is why it became important to me to do it, because something that is absolutely Australian. With Devouring Dark, one of the characters is, it's set in London, it's a London gangster novel, but there's an Australian, two protagonists and one of them, she's Australian. So I think it's really important. People seem to be really receptive to it as well. There was a time, and publishers, editors would tell you the same thing. It's like, yeah, this is great, but can you set it in the US? Because we can't sell it if people won't read about places. And more people slowly convinced publishers that actually, yeah, they will read about other places. They do want these other experiences. With the Alex Kane series, that's a trilogy of novels, and it's an Australian protagonist, and it goes all over the world. And I deliberately didn't include America in it. And it goes to Iceland and Rome and Australia and all these different places. And for exactly like you say, Mike, because I think people are interested. I mean, we read to experience and we read to travel without moving and all that sort of stuff, right? So yeah, I think it's important to showcase places, and especially if I can showcase Australia. This is a weird and messed up place, and it's especially for the horror and the fantasy and the strangeness. I mean, some things don't get much stranger than Australia. So
Clay's on mute, but we are obviously seeing the guy who really writes the fiction.
Yeah, we got a quick splash of the ghostwriter there, didn't we?
And this little guy.
I've been waiting for that to happen to me as well.
Yeah. He's a cute kid, Clay.
He's not mine. I don't know who that kid was.
Anyone else have questions before I've got a couple more, and then I want to move on to some other nerd stuff. Anyone else have questions or comments for Alan or Clay? Or Sean, for that matter? We don't get to see him very much.
So I did want to comment on the whole writing thing.
Okay.
And we like to think of writing as one huge, vast thing that we all do. But Chuck Palahniuk novels are very different from Nabokov. Lovecraft is different than Clark Ashton Smith or Robert E. Howard. I don't know how you imitate those with a machine and get it right. Maybe you can do one style and get it done right, but then how do you adapt that style and move it into different styles? I just, at some point, you can spend a lot of time programming your AI, or you could just write the damn book yourself. The code that you would have to write to mimic some of this stuff might be more complicated than writing the novel in the first place.
Yeah, and maybe I'm an idealist, but what about the sense of pride? I mean, if you pass off something that an AI did as your own.
On the flip side, some coders would say, hey, I created an AI that passed the test.
Yeah.
They're perfectly happy with that.
The only thing I would say, and I agree with everybody, there's some optimism here, and then there's some pessimism as well that of what could be. But I would say regarding art, and I would say chess is an art, and any major chess player, grandmaster, will tell you the same. But yet Kasparov, as early as the 90s, got defeated, and now the Deep Blue, the computers and AIs now are far beyond that. There is no world champion now that could beat a computer in what is essentially what we had always said was an art. So we've already seen it in one field. I just think, and by the way, Matt,
wait a second on that. It's like goes back to my point. I can outrun Usain Bolt with a car. Who cares if a computer can beat a man or a woman? It doesn't matter. It's a device, a tool. What's important is And it goes back into the fact that, well, you place a numerical value on the weight of a move, and the computer can go like 500 moves into the future on every possible ramification and choose the highest point value to direct its move. There's no, to me, that's completely disinteresting. I don't know.
Well, I would say one that the people who create the modern, it's more like, Matt, what you said, because now those grandmasters use this as a tool for training. So it's actually a good thing. A lot of these computer trainers, but the people who create the codes, who make these major chess programs, would now say they're not doing simple number crunching. It's something else. I don't know, how much so, but at least, like you said, it could be used for training wheels or to help you get better as a player. But
Alan, what is your personal definition of success as a writer? Some people might say monetary, some people might say something else, or a combination of things. But what does success mean to you as a writer or person, or however you want to answer it?
It's elusive. I've never spoken to anyone who was like, yeah, I'm happy with where I am. Every single person I've ever spoken to, however successful they appear to be, there's always something else they want. Somebody's won all these awards and they'd always be like, yeah, but I haven't won that one yet. It's that's kind of my mindset as well. Like it's like with the martial arts. It's not like when you're training and like Keanu Reeves goes, oh, I know Kung Fu. No, you don't. Like you've learned, some, but you don't know it because there's no end to it. Doesn't matter how much you know, you can always get better. That's the whole point. I could teach my students everything I've got to teach them, and I could then spend another lifetime helping them to get better at doing that. So for me, I think success is kind of a rolling and ongoing thing, and it kind of translates, I suppose, to readers all the time. I'm getting more readers, and all the time I bring out a book and people buy it, and hopefully every time something comes out I have a few more readers, and then they go sort of back through the backlist. All the time that process is kind of growing, then that's success. I mean, it would be amazing to sign the big movie options. It would be amazing to make good money at it rather than scraping by like most of us do. It would be amazing to get the Stephen King endorsement tweet. It would be all those different things that are just great signifiers. All of those would be great, but for me really it's just a case of all the time I can keep doing what I'm doing and people still respond to it, and all the time I'm doing it slowly, it grows. That's ongoing success, really. I think it's too hard to try to dream of anything bigger.
I believe that I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it about growing and always try to be growing. And I'm sure you probably agree with me that it's not a question of I'll be happy when or if this happens, but I hope it does. But I'm enjoying the journey along the way as well.
Yeah. I mean, all the time, if the passion of striving to be better has gone, then the passion for the art has gone. So yeah, for me, it's always okay. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to get better at it. Hopefully, I want to build an audience continually as I go along. All the time that's happening, that's good. I would love to get the sudden, the up spike from some big success that doubles, trebles, quadruples my audience. I mean, fantastic, because I like to eat and pay the rent and stuff. So all that's true, but all the time I get to do what I'm doing, and there's slow growth to it, and a process of development. Then that's good.
Clay, same question. What is success to you?
I mean, success has been the notion of being able to tell stories. That I feel very fortunate that I have been able to tell stories for however long, and as long as I can keep telling stories, I feel like that kind of level of success is. I think that's how I measure my own personal success. Sometimes I get to tell the stories that I want to tell. Sometimes I'm invited to, tell other people's stories. It's really, I don't know. I feel like I have this life where I wake up and I get to write. And that is not something that everybody gets to do. And I feel like I should count my blessings and feel very fortunate for that. I've, I don't necessarily win awards, or, I'm not on bestseller lists. Those are great things to aspire to. But at the end of the day, it's like, I get to like raise my family. I get to write these bizarre, spooky stories, and someone out there is reading them, hopefully. And I don't know, like it's a humble existence, but it's mine, and it feels very, I have this like kitty of stories, and I'm just dying to tell them. And I get to be like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Publisher, like, is this something that might interest you? And sometimes they're like, yeah. And I'll be like, great. And then I don't know, that well never kind of empties, but it keeps replenishing itself. So I think, telling stories.
That's great. I used to make a lot more money than I do right now, a lot more money as a realtor in Iowa before I got sick. As it became clear that I could no longer do that, my wife got a job down here in Texas, close to her sister, and I started doing this. And I can honestly say that I'm, we all like to have a lot of money, right? It's a good thing. But I can honestly say inside I'm happier doing what I do, because I'm reaching out to people. People are enjoying it. You guys are doing the same in your own way. And
it's
so,
about like being
yeah.
richer in the bank or richer in the soul, isn't it? Like it would be
Good
great
point.
to be rich in the bank and the soul, because that makes things easier. But if you just kind of had to pick one in the long time, when you get to the end and you look back, which would you prefer? It's like, well, I'm sitting on a pile of cash, but I had a miserable existence, or I got to make a difference and I got by.
It's very true. I often ask myself, what would I on my deathbed think of what I'm doing now, when my decisions, would he reach for the money with the no soul, or would he go for the soul, as you just said? And I know what he would say. I know what he would regret and not regret. And so, I imagine myself there, and I want to follow his instructions, his desires, so to, his advice, so to speak. So
nobody says, damn it, I should have spent more time in the office.
Exactly. Okay, so let's bring it down a bit. One of the common complaints I get on this show is they're not really complaints, they're faux complaints, that we keep adding to people's TBR lists and their horror shows to watch list, their horror movies to watch list.
Well, screw those people.
Sorry?
Screw those people.
Well, actually, Bridget's one of those, used to be one of those people, probably still is.
But Bridget is still one of those people.
Yeah,
Yes.
Bridget used to, I want you to tell this real quick. Bridget used to listen to the show before she was a panelist, and she would listen to the audio version on your commute, right?
Yes. And then I would get so bummed out because I'd have nowhere to write down all the books and movies that you had mentioned while I was driving. So then when I got home, I'd have to back up on the podcast and be like, okay, I'm ready now. Write down.
I'm gonna write them all down. That's how I got that extra listen.
It was me.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, Lovecraft eZine Press has just published a book called Rules for Monsters by Michael Minnis. It's available on Amazon. I've got the link in the show notes. It's available on Amazon on Kindle and print. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, if you are a member of that program. Michael Minnis is a very underrated writer that a lot of people have not heard about. Very underrated Lovecraftian writer. He wrote one of the scariest, creepiest short stories I've ever read, called Snuff Movie, which is not really what at first you might think it's about. the collection opens up with Saltaire, and this is just book one because he had so many. And it's available right now. Just go to Amazon if you don't have the link handy, and type in Rules for Monsters, Michael Minnis, Minnis. And hope you guys enjoy it. And Mike certainly deserves the attention. I'll tell you that. He's very, very talented. Wouldn't you agree, Pete?
Yeah. My relationship with Mike goes back more than a decade. He probably doesn't even know who I am. But, I can remember.
He probably does. He's a nice guy.
He's an artist too, right?
I think so, but
Okay.
I've been focused on his writing for.
Yeah. No, I've read him for a long time, and I look forward to reading this in my vast to be read pile, which grows faster and faster every week.
I want to thank Kenneth Kane for his technical expertise on this book. I want to thank Steve Santiago for helping with the cover, and I very much want to thank Raisa Efras, who is, you guys may be familiar with Ina Efras, up and coming writer, very, very, very good writer. And her daughter did the cover for this book, is my point. And I asked her to base it off of the snuff movie story, and she did a really great job. So thank you, Raisa, and anyone out there who needs a cover or needs some artwork done. I've in the show notes, I've got a link to her Instagram, and you can message her through there. So yeah. So thank you, Raisa, and please, everyone, check out Rules for Monsters, Michael Minnis. Actually, one of I will say, I read Salt Air. Some of these are new, some of these are reprints, but the reprints are hard to find. So I first read Salt Air many years ago, and I really, really love it. And that's the collection starts out with that story. So please do check it out. And thank you, Raisa, and thank you, Enos, for putting me in contact with your daughter so she could do this. There's a new book out called The Miskatonic University Spiritualism Club by, I don't know who
some
this
hack
is.
writer, Pete
Some hack
Rawler.
writer. Pete Rollick. I've included the link in the show notes, and it is a beautiful book.
It is a beautiful book. I wish the writing was better.
I'm sure the writing is fine, although I do not yet.
There's an AI program for that.
Yes. Thank you, Clay. Exactly. The link is in the show notes. Buy a copy. And people are receiving their copies, and they're posting them online. You still have yours nearby, Bridget? Can you hold that up for anybody watching?
So
that is a beautiful cover. Who did that cover, Pete?
My publisher, Dan Sauer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So everyone's posting pictures of these books because they're just getting them like this week. Yeah, it's.
Oh, I forgot about the interior illustrations. That's right.
Don't show that one. That gives the whole story away.
What? It does not.
Oh, no.
Anyway,
we're at the HP Lovecraft Film Festival debuting the book, and Dan has this huge poster that he's done on 8 feet tall poster board, and it's like Jackanapes Press. And he's listed all and it's the big reveal scene from the book, and I'm like, what are you doing? No, but it's beautiful. It's just, nobody knows it's from the book until they get to it. But no, everybody's getting these books this week, and I'm seeing them. I'm I'm getting real nervous because I'm waiting for somebody to come out and say, this kind of sucks.
No, I'm sure it doesn't. Here's something interesting. This is
I can
there's a
give you that review if you want, Pete. I mean, it's no sweat, no problem. Okay, I'll go to Amazon right now. No sweat.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
Is it on Amazon too? I linked to the publisher link.
I'm not sure that it's on Amazon yet.
Okay. Moving on, Reassuring Tales, expanded edition, the weird fiction short stories of T.E.D. Klein. This one caught me unawares. It's not out yet. I think you can pre-order it. I've linked to this also in the show notes. I want to thank Ian Casey, who emailed me about this. I have a note here to read the synopsis. Do I really need to do that? I mean, it's T.E.D. Klein, right? Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to find a lot of stories in there that I don't have a copy yet, but that maybe are either hard to find or whatnot. But I mean, it's Ted Klein. Come on. So there's that. Scott Thomas has another book coming out. Actually, hasn't had a book out in a little while. I'm very happy for Scott. He's such a great writer. As I said before the show started, or maybe during the show, his writing is just dripping with autumn and that October feeling. It's called The Veil of the White Horse. It's a collection, and it is not available yet for pre-order, but I did include a link to it just to whet everybody's appetite. When it's available for order or pre-order, Joe Morey, the publisher, is going to let me know, and I will let all of you guys know. So, and if I can just say, it is that time of year again where you either read or reread Autumn Cthulhu, edited by Mike Davis. All I have to say is it's got a story by Pete Rawlik in it. In this anthology.
Is it, did I write a story? Oh yeah, I know that one. Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I rejected your first story, remember?
Yeah.
We're still friends, right?
Dude, you don't know how many times before we were friends, you rejected me like a dozen times. You've just completely
I think that's a bit of an overstatement.
It was Matt Carpenter who accepted something from me for the eZine for the first time. And then you were like, yeah, this is a great story.
Matt Carpenter.
Okay, so here's about Autumn Cthulhu. I held in my hand the very first copy that Mike Davis brought to the San Pedro Film Festival, I think.
Everybody kept stealing it from me.
Well, the thing is, I had it and I went over to a corner table and I started reading it and you tracked me down and made me give it back. I was really offended.
I did? I'm glad I offended you. I tried.
You just said, "Oh no, I need that for something else." Okay.
Ironically,
fine.
That's the same convention where Matthew, is a very generous friend, gives me this very expensive book called October Dreams, because he knows I'm into all this autumn stuff, and I'm reading it on the flight home. It's just really, really great. And I was like, do I feel a twinge of guilt about that? I think I do.
No, you don't. Okay, wait.
Laird Barron, Gemma Files, Nadia Bolkin, John Lang, and Richard Gavin, Joseph Pulver, Jeff Thomas, Scott Thomas, so on and so forth.
Now, I can't believe we have not mentioned it yet in October on the eZine show.
Hang on. It's only $2.99 on Kindle right now.
I know what you're going to say.
So continue, Matt.
I am a watchdog. My name is Snuff.
Yeah, I knew it.
Of course.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Of course.
If you already missed October 1st, you can still pull out your copy of A Night in the Lonesome October by Roger Zelazny with the wonderful Gahan Wilson illustrations and enjoy a wonderful sit down.
Bridget, you are on the ball today.
You don't even have to wear little cat ears or whatever you're wearing, but they do help.
Bridget, we should double your salary.
We should.
Wait,
actually, I'm gonna triple it.
You guys get salary?
Speaking of, Stuart Onan told me, I did a Patreon podcast with him the other night. He told me this time of year, every year, he gets emails from people saying it's that time of year to read The Night Country. I interviewed him about The Night Country because they just did a new limited edition about it, and Yeah, you talk about a book that's steeped in Halloween and October and autumn. If you haven't read The Night Country, the limited edition is really, really great. I only have a copy because Stuart's generous. It's expensive, and it's got illustrations by Francois Villancourt, if I'm saying his name right. But I mean, you can get the hardcover for like $2 or $3 on Amazon too. It's really worth the read. And if you look it up on Amazon and read the synopsis, you'll be just, if you're into October and autumn at all, you'll be sold. So
speaking of Stuart Onan, have you ever read his book, his nonfiction book, The Circus Fire?
No, but he told me about it the other night, so I'm going to.
It's, Night Country is amazing, but I feel like I might say The Circus Fire is my favorite of his books. Totally unlike any of his other books, but it's
all of his books are totally different than his other books.
Very, very true. Very true. But I would wholeheartedly recommend the Circus Fire.
All right. Well, your recommendations hold weight with me, and he said the same thing. He's the author, but and of course, Snow Angels was made into a movie with Kate Beckinsale. So yeah, he's a great writer. But since this is October, Matt is right. Night in the Lonesome October, The Night Country, Autumn Cthulhu. Yeah, I'm the editor, but I do think it's a really good book, and that's on the writers. Some very good writers in that book. Did not know Clay and Alan then, but Autumn Cthulhu too. Those guys will get an invite. So if they want it, and then yeah, Sean Hamill too. What the hell? I mean, I'm kidding, man. Of course you will. You know how I feel about you and Cosmology of Monsters. Although I'm afraid because Sean Hamill is moving to my geographical area next month. So
So I better get that invite.
Yeah, exactly. Or you'll be at my house going. Yes, now, you will get that invite.
I have turned in 2 stories.
What?
For Autumn Cthulhu too.
Well, Christ, man, I've been busy. I'll get to him. I promise.
When a man says he'll do something, he'll do it. There is no need to keep bringing it up decade after decade.
That's exactly right. Hey, Cisco sent me a story for Autumn Cthulhu 2 that I haven't had a chance to read yet.
Oh, I thought he said one for Autumn Cthulhu 1.
No, 2. He didn't send me one. He didn't send me one for 1.
Well, yeah, he did. He's just late.
No, that's Langan. I want it to come out next year, so I told Langan to start writing now. All right, now, anybody who needs to leave, please do. But I would like to talk about a couple of other things real quick. The Batman trailer, I thought was fantastic. Anyone agree? Disagree? Great, I'm the only nerd who's seen it. Great.
I haven't seen it yet.
Nerd who's seen it?
Sean, what did you think?
I haven't actually seen it yet. A friend of mine sent me a
You're
link
a DC
to it.
guy.
I know, but I've been offline. I got a link from a buddy in text, like right as I was hopping on the show. So I will be watching it once I sign off.
Okay, well, there you go. I'm really looking forward to this version of Batman. Seriously.
I think it's going to be good.
Anybody else?
How many villains are they going to have?
Well, the Riddler seems to be front and center, and I really like this version of Catwoman from what I've seen of her.
And we also have the Penguin.
We do. Oh, that's right. Colin Farrell's the Penguin.
And the trailer has someone who, if he's not the Joker, it looks similar to the Joker.
I hope we don't have the Joker. We've done the Joker a few times now. So,
wait. So we have the Penguin, the Riddler, the Joker, and Catwoman.
Catwoman is not a villain.
We just need Adam West.
Matt,
This is like a rewrite of the 66 movie,
Matt,
isn't it?
that's enough.
No. Okay.
Where's my shark repellent?
It's written and directed by Matt Reeves, who did Cloverfield and the American remake of Let the Right One In. So
And didn't
There
he
you go.
direct the first episode of I Know What You Did Last Summer?
not to my knowledge, not to my knowledge.
Who did we just lose? Was it? It wasn't Carpenter. He's still here.
Rich. Rich ducked out. He put a comment in the chat, said he had to go.
Oh, right.
I
yeah.
got to go too. So just remember to send in your entry to ezineprizes@gmail.com. Put guild in the subject heading, and you could win this really nice urban fantasy. Good night,
All right.
all.
Thanks for being here, Matt. I'll see you soon.
I also have to head out. I'm gonna put some boys to bed before they turn into pumpkins. But thank you so much for having
I'm
me
very
on.
happy you were here. Thank you so
It
much.
was a blast. It was a blast.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween, everybody. We'll see
Yes.
you.
Yay.
Happy Halloween.
Here we go. Thanks so
Yeah.
much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, Clay. So here.
Take care.
My son bet me that the Court of Owls game trailer was going to be better than the Batman movie trailer. And I had to tell him he was wrong today. Don't get me wrong. The Court of Owls trailer was great. And I love Nightwing, not the Titans version of Nightwing, but the comics version of Nightwing. He's one of the best people in the DC universe. Wouldn't you agree, Sean?
100%. He's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, he's very kind. He's got a great heart. Besides being a great superhero, I mean, trained by Batman.
He
Yeah.
just needs to be. He needs to be adapted well for television.
He does. Now he's adapted well. Logan told me, I was so happy because I haven't seen him yet in a couple of animated movies. The Judas Contract, I think. Teen Titans, the Judas Contract. So I'm gonna watch that either tonight or tomorrow.
Has anybody seen the 2-movie adaptation of The Long Halloween?
I have.
seen
yes.
I've seen the first part of it. I haven't seen the second part yet, but I'm liking it so far.
Okay.
I've seen both.
And
I liked it. I didn't love it.
okay.
It's watchable. It's good. I don't think it measures up to the comic, but then again, the last time I read the comic was 15 years ago. You know, I've got that. I'm sure I'm the only one here who has that DC Universe
Nostalgia.
Infinite, right, Sean? And it's on there. So, you know, all the DC comics you can read for $5.99 a month or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's yeah, you can read enough Batman until you puke, basically.
You can fall into this rabbit hole and never come out. Seriously.
It's a pretty good deal, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good deal. Do we want to talk about Midnight Mass or do we want to wait till next week?
I haven't finished it, so if you guys are getting
I
into
haven't seen
spoiler
it yet.
territory, I'll have to bail. I'm in episode 4.
So I love when Godzilla shows up.
God damn it, Pete.
King of the spoilers. You forgot the Pete Rollick rule. Is it 3 years or 5 years?
Oh yeah, I
I
forget which
believe
one.
it's
What was
3
it?
years.
Holy kaiju, Batman.
But it depends on the. I think it depends on like the movie though. Like I think there's some like clauses at the end. Like some things you can give spoilers a little sooner, right?
Yeah,
You're talking about Midnight Mass still?
We don't know.
the Rollick rule.
I honestly I have to give it another go, but I got into the second episode and I'm like, there's way too many like slow pans. I'm like, it's a little too slow paced for me. And I'm like, maybe I'm just not in the right mindset, but I'm like the third time they like pan into like the one main character's face. He's like lying in bed, like looking sadly. And I'm like, do we have to have like 10 minutes of this? Like, can we move on to like
All right, let's vote. Are we talking about this? Because if we are, Sean has to go.
No,
Yeah,
let's
I
not
haven't
talk
seen
about
it
All
that.
right, we'll do
Yeah, I
it.
don't-
We'll
it's
do it
probably not
next
good.
week. We'll do it next week. But listeners want me
Probably
to
a good
talk
idea
about this.
because I could get on a bit of a high horse about that one. I enjoyed it.
Me, too, Alan.
Me too.
I can't even bring myself to watch it because y'all keep dissing it so much.
I think it's fantastic television. I think absolutely you should watch it. It's really incredible. The performances and everything are fantastic, but there's this foundational stuff that I can't get past. So,
All right.
so I'm conflicted. But anyway, yeah, we're not going to spoil it. So.
All right.
Well, now I kind of want to hear though. Are you going to talk about it on Twitter at some point?
I did. If you troll back through my Twitter, it's a little bit spoilery, but then yeah, I was kind of sarcastically open about my issues on there.
Okay.
We'll
so
talk about
I'll
next
find
week.
out,
It's got a
yeah.
really high Rotten Tomatoes score, so I'll probably the world will hate us if we say anything negative about
Oh look,
it.
it's bold and amazing television. It is fantastic television.
All right.
I want to go on
Last,
record as a Mike Flanagan
and-
stan, just in general.
Bly Manor is one of the
Beautiful,
most.
too. It's beautifully shot. I mean, it really is.
Okay, all I'll say is I don't care for Midnight Mass, but I think that Bly Manor is one of the most perfect
Yeah.
TV horror series ever done. You
I
guys know I've been
agree.
talking about Absentia, the movie, for
Mhm.
years. So I'm not dissing Mike Flanagan here. I just don't care for Midnight Mass. That's all.
I love Bly Manor too. That was fantastic.
That was just perfect. It was really good.
So last but not least, it's gonna be Halloween soon. Anybody want to throw some Halloween movie suggestions out there?
Trick or treat.
Huh?
Trick or treat.
Trick or treat?
Yes.
Oh, of course.
I just watched it again this afternoon. Man,
Perfect Halloween movie.
does that, there's a little bit of TNA in the beginning that I wish I could do without, and it would be a great kids film.
Yeah.
A kids film.
Well, if your kids are the Addams family.
No, I
But-
mean, we don't want to see naked women, but the violence is okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
Put that
It's
right.
always been a strange dichotomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's the American way to an outsider.
Mhm.
Anybody
Yeah.
shows a nipple, you lose your collective minds, but shoot someone in the head live on TV, no problem.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Right. Exactly.
So I took my kid to see a double feature at the movie theater. We saw Night of the Creeps and
Sweet.
Return of the Living Dead.
Oh my gosh.
very
That's
good.
great.
And
That's awesome.
they spent most of a good portion of Return of the Living Dead like this because they did not want to see Trash's naked body. And I had
Okay.
forgotten who is it? Linnea Quigley.
Yeah.
Gets naked in that for a good portion of her time on screen. So
Right. Nudity aside, Kim Smelter says, and I agree, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Corpse
Mhm.
Bride, Nightmare Before
Definitely.
Christmas. I'm not
Beetlejuice.
going to
Yes.
name purely Halloween movies right now, but I will give you a list of some of my favorite horror movies real quickly. Please don't shoot me. This is objective. It Follows, Scream, Absentia, The Fog, The New Daughter,
original or remake of The Fog?
original, of course.
Well, just making sure you have taste.
Good Lord. The New Daughter, Pontypool, The Devil's Backbone, What Lies Beneath, The Ninth Gate, Session 9, The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which has to be one of the best
Horror
trailers ever done. The trailer is hilarious. The Vast of Night, which I don't know if that's a horror movie, but I think it is. Horror sci-fi.
It's really good, whatever it is.
Yeah. Bubba Hotep, The Skeleton Key, and The Wretched. That's what I have. For
My wife
now.
went into labor watching Bubba Hotep. We
Really?
have an unusual,
Aw.
we have an unusual relationship with that movie.
I bet.
Hilarious.
We were watching it and it was like, do we stop the movie and go? Or she's like, wait, no, I don't know. And so we saw out the movie and then in the car and off we went.
You had to think about it?
Well, she was waiting. She didn't want to necessarily go too soon.
Oh.
Like, I don't. She's like, I don't know if this is the real thing or is this another false alarm or not. And by the time the movie's ended, she's like, no, we have to go. It's, okay, let's go.
You name your
That's all
child
right.
Bruce Campbell or anything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Do you know you induced labor in my wife? It'd be impressive.
Mike DeBronzo is a very good friend and very loyal patron and viewer. I'll quickly read his list too. American Werewolf in London, Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Alien, John Carpenter's The Thing, John Carpenter's Halloween, John Carpenter's The Fog. Just kidding. I threw that in, DeBronzo. The Haunting, 63. Night of the Demon,
Yes.
1957.
Yes.
The Shining, Kubrick. Dracula, 1931. The Thing from Another World, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And that's it. Yeah.
All right. So to that, I will add 3 films.
Thank you.
Coraline.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's a Halloween film, but Coraline, just.
Well, I'm not saying any of these are, but they're horror films.
All right. And then for fun, The Abominable Dr. Fives and Dr. Fives Returns.
Dr. Fives rises again.
Rises again. Thank you. Thank you. Those are horror comedies that I just, I really enjoy, and I know Joe really enjoyed them.
I love them too. It's also good that they finally got the rights to the song from The Wizard of Oz at the end.
Yes.
Because they took it's funny when you see a movie and they have to alter it. And
Well,
I
we've
remember-
already mentioned Trick or Treat, Mark. Mark said no love for Trick or Treat. We've
That
already
was the
mentioned
first one I shouted out. I watched it again this afternoon, and
one of the best Halloween movies out there.
Yep.
Coraline really scared Danielle. So
It's a
I
really
think
good movie.
It is a really
It
good
really
film.
is.
Yeah.
Coraline is a
Talk-
genuinely creepy movie. Like, it's a genuinely scary film.
Yeah.
Talking about Mike,
yes,
talking about things that might scare your wife.
please go on.
The conclusion of Evil. I haven't seen the last episode yet, but they've been doing a lot of interesting things with dolls. And I believe your wife has a phobia about that.
You believe correctly. I can't get her to listen to the audible version of Ellen Datlow's doll anthologies. So, anything else before we go?
I've got a book rec.
Sure.
Just that it's recent, but I think it's a perfect Halloween read. My friend Rachel Harrison, her second book came out about almost 2 weeks ago. It's called Cackle. And it's about a woman who moves from New York City to a small town upstate. She's just gone through a breakup and goes to this small town where everything's just kind of a little too perfect. And meets this woman named Sophie, who everybody in the town seems a little too afraid of and respectful of. And of course, Sophie takes this woman, the narrator, under her wing, and it just kind of unrolls from there. But it's this great, like, it feels very fall. It's another book, speaking of stuff that actually feels like, falling leaves and sweater weather and all that. It's really great. It's also really funny. It's very a great feminist sort of fable, but also there's some genuine creep stuff in there too that I don't want to give away. That Rachel's the goods. I mean, she's my friend, but I'd say that. Yeah.
I want to say, Melissa, 1 second. I'm sorry. I want to just say that if you're into that quiet horror, like you said, leaves blowing down the street type thing, obviously Ray Bradbury, but Charles L. Grant as well.
Where would you suggest someone start with Charles L. Grant if they haven't read him?
Well, the Pet is really good.
I believe most of that stuff is going out of print or out of print already. So whatever you can find.
Fair.
There's some of his collections I think are the best. Sorry about that. My alarm's going off. The one with Pete, where he goes to the library in January and he's reading. It's too important not to look up real quick. I'm sorry, because I want to answer his question. The ironic thing is I was reading it it'll be on my Kindle. That's the fastest way to do it. Apologies, folks. Give me just a second. And Melissa, you had something to say while I look for this.
He wrote at least.
I was saying bye to Bridget, but while we were talking about like Coraline, another good like kind of animated movie. I guess it's more for kids, but it still holds up. Is Monster House?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. I had it when my kids were younger, and I remember it was just like it is truly creepy. Like it's good.
I don't think of Monster House as a kids movie.
Well, I felt really bad because my son, who didn't like horror movies and he was younger, like the beginning, there's a little girl on a tricycle and she's going and he was just like looking and looking like he knew something was going to happen. And then as soon as the thing happened, it's like there's a jump scare. He just screams and runs off. He's like, I'm never watching that movie again. Like he was just like, but it is really good.
I love that movie.
Pete, you're not wrong about the out of print. You can still find them though, Charles Grant, but there's quite a few, Sean, very cheap Kindle versions of Charles Grant books. Now, the one I was referring to, here's a good place to start, maybe. The Complete Short Fiction of Charles Grant, Volume 1, Nightmare Seasons. Let's see here. Let me just read a couple of things real quick from here that I've highlighted.
Hey, it's only $4 on Kindle.
Yeah, exactly.
Sold.
But it's like $4,000 on
in mass market paperback.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see here. Which one's the best one to
I
read?
still don't get that, Sean. I'm never going to understand why, you'll publishers, Amazon's putting it out there. You know what these things are going for on the resale market. Why don't you just put out a cheap paperback?
Yeah.
Agreed.
I do not need another edition of Dune.
Right.
Or the Lord of the, I look, I was in the book trade and I go to a lot of used bookstores. There are some things I never need to be.
Yeah, there's plenty of Lord of the Rings versions.
Lord of the Rings, Dune, I don't think you need the complete tales of Edgar Allan Poe ever.
Right.
So here's a quote from Nightmare Seasons, and it starts off with this writer that goes to the library in January, and it's just been raining forever, Sean, and the librarian brings him this weird book. It doesn't even have a title, and says, take this home and read it, and it's supposedly about some strange but true. It's 4 stories, 4 novellas, strange but true stories that have happened in the town. And here's a quote. Meanwhile, I stand at the window with the wind shimmering behind me. It's the middle of the night. And I see each time the wind shifts the indistinct figure of someone standing just outside the reach of the street light, of someone darker than shadow in the corner of my porch, of someone waiting on the lawn, oblivious to the storm. I see it, but I don't believe it. Charles Grant is always a slow burn. The other one I would recommend would be Dialing the Wind, and the cover to Dialing the Wind. Oh my God. That 80s, one of those 80s horror covers. And the cover to Dialing the Wind is pure autumn, I tell you. So anything else? I know this podcast has gone on longer than usual, but
I
yeah,
do
Pete.
want to talk about something.
Yeah.
Just
So
before you do, guys, I'm going to duck out. I got to run. So
Me
thank
too.
you so
All
much for having me. Great
Thanks,
to see
Alan.
you all.
Thank you for being here, Alan.
No worries. Thank you.
Read the
guys.
GULP, people.
Okay.
Yeah, read the GULP. Hit me
Read
up
the
on
GULP.
Twitter. I'm always there. I spend too much time on Twitter, so come say hi. Thanks, guys.
Will do. Mark says, always love your book recommendations. My Kindle's full of them. Thank you. So,
Aw.
Pete.
So many years ago, my friend and the publisher of the New York Review of Science Fiction, Dave Hartwell, mentioned that there's not a lot of reviews of local live plays or horror productions or science fiction that make it into the outer world. He knows they exist, particularly in New York City and Chicago and LA, but nobody reviews them. Small theater stuff just does not get reviewed and make it into the world. So last week, my kid and I got the opportunity to go and see one of our local horror haunts. And I wrote up a 2,000 word review. And
oh, wow.
That's
Mike,
amazing.
Mike, you picked it up and you put it out there.
Oh, that's right.
And I really appreciate that. But I think that,
That's right. The other day. Yeah.
Yeah. These are people who, and I know that they're all around the country. These are people who are essentially putting on theater.
I totally agree with you because I just went to the most awesome family owned haunt last night, and it was like everything was homemade, like everything, every room, like every actor had a scene. It was like improv. It was amazing, and I'm just like, you could tell it was like a labor of love. Like it was awesome.
I was just thinking that exact phrase, Melissa, when you were talking.
And they do it 100 times a night.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing. I do think we should have more reviews.
There's just something about when I see an artist of any stripe who does it just purely because they love it, and who wouldn't take $1 million if somebody handed it to them for your art or your writing or whatever, or your acting, but just doing it just because this is who they are. They love it.
Yeah.
Pete Rawlich's a great example. Pete Rawlich, he breathes and he writes. I'm not sure which one he does more of, but Rick's the same way. Rick's not internationally famous, but man, he loves what he reads and he loves what he writes. By the way, if you haven't picked up the Shadow
Chronology,
the
Shadow Chronology,
the Shadow Chronology book by Rick Lay, you should. Do I have that title exactly right, Rick?
Chronology of Shadows.
Chronology of Shadows, yes. And it is available on Kindle too.
But yeah, anyway, I would love to see more reviews nationwide of little things that you can only get to locally.
I think there's a huge, because I think one of the authors was talking about that. Like, I think it's so interesting to read about places that I can't go to, like to have something set in Australia or like somewhere where I can like learn about what, like what's really going on, or things that are different from where I live. Like, I love that. And I do think, there should be more awareness and reviews of local things like that, because there's a lot of stuff that'll just get lost to time. It might go on for a few years and, and then nothing. And then this is like a memory to people.
So I can remember when I was a kid, we used to go to Ocean City, Maryland in the summers. And on the pier there, they had a haunted house. And I can look at the Google Earth images and I know that haunted house is still there. So
it's lasted since the 1850s.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's probably been there for like 30, 40, 50 years. And, but that's a summertime thing for them because, it's a resort town.
Yeah.
So, but when you think of haunts as like October things, but that's different all around the country, right? Because in upstate New York is very different than South Florida.
Definitely. Even in parts of Pennsylvania, like when you go out, like some of like the more unique haunts I've been to are just out in like a rural area where you have to drive really far to get to. And
Right.
I don't know if it's like
Same
there's
around
not a lot
here in
going on.
Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. Like where the ones that are like more like just like have like a high volume, like they're
Right.
just pushing you through, like which is like that's what they have to do. Like thousands of people are coming. But I think you can start getting like once you start getting more out into like remote areas, there's some more I don't know if people have more time on their hands or they can just do more like creative things because it's not a mass audience that they're showing their art to. So
There was a winery in Western Pennsylvania, or maybe it's Central Pennsylvania, that did does a whole Renaissance festival thing through the summer. But in October, they do Poe.
yeah, at Mount Hope. Yeah,
Yes,
I've been to
yeah.
that. Yes.
Yeah, so have I.
That's awesome.
And then in December they do Scrooge.
Charles.
Charles
Oh,
Dickens.
yeah, Charles Dickens. Yeah.
Yeah. So, those are the kind of creative things I love to see. And
Yeah.
They just don't get advertised enough. And I felt like doing that. I really feel like reaching out next year earlier and doing more of the local haunts and getting reviews.
That sounds really cool because I would just read reviews of haunts like in other states. I think it would be so
Right?
interesting to see because they change a little bit every year too, even the
Right.
ones you go to that are local.
Yeah.
Next time, send me something, and when you send me something, I'll post it on the site too.
I'm gonna write a review of the place I went last night now.
Because I'll do it and send it to Mike.
Send it to me.
Yeah.
And I know you got a book review that I've got to post, and Logan Noble has a book review that I've got to post.
Yeah, I have a few. I'll message with you later.
All right. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. It's good to see Melissa, everybody that's now gone too, of course, but since you're here, and Rick, really good to see you. I don't think I've seen you in a few weeks. So Pete, thanks for spending an hour on the phone the other night with me and cheering me up. Really appreciate it. You're a good friend.
No problem.
You all are. So next week we have, of course, it's always subject to change, but next week we have Callie White, who wrote The Monsters We Make, which is a fictional account of newspaper boys in the 80s that disappeared. Interestingly, November 7th, we've got Philip Gillott and Morgan Galen King. You guys heard of a movie called The Spine of Night yet?
Mm-mm.
It's an animated movie, and it's getting a lot. There's a lot of hype around it. Apparently Laird's already seen it and loved it. An ultra-violent fantasy epic. Ancient dark magic falls into sinister hands and unleashes ages of suffering onto mankind. A group of heroes from different eras and cultures must band together in order to defeat it at all costs. Philip Gillott, our friend, and Morgan Galen King directed and wrote it. Here's the actors: Richard E. Grant, Lucy Lawless, Patton Oswalt, Betty Gabriel, and Joe Manganiello. Am I saying his name right? Lend their voices to this adult animated fantasy horror.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Opens in theaters and on digital and on demand on October the 29th. So when they're on the podcast on October 7th, you can already have seen this. And I'm really proud of Philip, and I don't know Morgan Galen King yet, but if he's friends with Philip, I'm sure he's a nice guy and a talented guy. Hey, Philip's he's a big time movie guy now, and he's a Patreon. So there you go. If you're not a Patreon. Speaking of patrons, thank you for keeping me in business. I'll leave it at that. Without you, we couldn't do this, really. So appreciate it. And without you guys, we couldn't do this either, because I'd be pretty boring talking to just myself. So thanks a lot, guys. It's good to see you. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks, Rick, Melissa. Kelly,
Good night.
or not Kelly. Why am I thinking Kelly? He was giving me shit in the live stream. Pete. Yes. Sorry. And we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.